Alright, let's get rolling on our walkthrough for the Rise of Tiamat, Book 2 in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign. I would love to jump straight into Chapter 1, the Council of Waterdeep, but that chapter contains 4 separate meetings of the Council throughout this entire story, so you need an understanding of the story's structure in order to understand the explanation of that chapter. The problem with that is this book doesn't really have a structure. I don't know if they wanted to make it more freeform because they got so much feedback about the Horde of the Dragon Queen being a railroad. I'm not sure. But we are going to fix that. We're going to give this story the structure it deserves. I'm Dad the Dungeon Master. I've been a DM for over a decade. I am a published author and I have run this campaign for multiple groups. So I've made every mistake and I'm going to help you guys avoid those. So let's dig in. So as I mentioned, whenever we first talked about Horde of the Dragon Queen, they stuck too strictly to a story structure. And they didn't leave a lot of freedom for player choice. And it made a lot of people feel like that book, that campaign, was a railroad. So I think that they didn't want to do that again. And I think instead they gave you a lot of really nice pieces. There are some really great dungeons and encounters in this book. But they completely jumbled up the structure so there's not really a story to follow. The right answer, the right way to go about it is something in the middle. You kind of need to use a story structure. I like the 3-act story structure as somewhat of a framework, but you need to leave room for player choice. You need to not stick too strictly to it because it is a game. And with games, there's going to be a lot of, like, you go on a mission, you achieve something, you go on a mission, maybe you fail, something changes. It's not going to be like a constant progression towards your end goal. There are going to be successes and failures, and the story has to have freedom to incorporate that and still be able to get to the end, to the climax of the story. So I am going to use some elements of a 3-act story structure to take the pieces from this book and put them together in a cohesive way, but I'm also going to explain where, and the book mentions that the DM needs to add more stuff. They know they don't have enough meat here for an entire second half of this campaign to get the party to level 16. So props to them for knowing that, but there's very little guidance on how you should go about fixing that. So I will take care of filling all that in. I am going to reorder some of the missions because the way it's set up, Chapter 1 is these 4 Councils of Waterdeep. Chapter 2 is like one big mission to the Sea of Moving Ice. Chapters 3 and 4 are put together in one section for some reason, where it's 2 different wormspeakers missions you go on to try and to get them. Then Chapter 5 is these different attacks where the cult comes back to attack the party, so those are going to be spread throughout. And then Chapter 6 is just a short little diplomacy mission to some dragons. Chapter 7 is another dungeon where you're going to try and get one of the dragon masks. Chapter 8 is just another diplomacy mission, this time to Thay. And then Chapter 9 is the final battle with Tiamat. So it doesn't make a lot of sense the way they put it together. But like I said, there are some good pieces in there, and we can make a good story out of it. So this is how I go about it. Your party should be level 8 when this book starts. They should either be on Skyreach Castle with Blagothkus, or Skyreach Castle crashed and they are somewhere in the north. They either went down with the castle or they escaped somehow. Either way, the book wants them to be called to the Council of Waterdeep. Either a messenger shows up or they show up back in Waterdeep and Leosin brings them to the council. And it's common knowledge to all of the powers that be in the Sword Coast that the Cult of the Dragon has gotten too big for their britches, so to speak, and it's time to deal with them. One of the big mistakes that a lot of DMs make and authors make is that they don't let the characters drive the story. They kind of make the story happen to the characters. That is not satisfying in a book. It's even worse in a D&D campaign because your party wants to feel like the heroes. They want to be the ones making the decisions. They want to be the ones figuring things out. They should be the ones driving the story forward. So what I do is, most of the times that I've run this, they saved the castle, they befriended Blagothkus because of the way I set up that chapter, and at the end, they chase off Glazel the Cloud Chaser, and Talus the White has betrayed them and leaves with Glazel. I use her and him as sort of recurring villains in this book. I'll get to that in just a minute. So most of the time, my parties are there on the castle with Blagothkus, and Blagothkus is pretty much willing to take them wherever they want to go, but afterward, he wants to go meet with his people to discuss the situation, because he was kind of siding with the cult to try and create a big enough villain for all of Giant Kind to unite against, because he wants to use a common enemy to bring his people together. Not the craziest idea ever, but because of the party convincing him to kind of work against the cult, now he's got to go see where things stand and reanalyze things with his allies. And that castle, he will come back up later. But what I do is, while the party is hanging out there trying to decide where they want Blagothkus to drop them off, I kind of remind the party that, like, their mission was to gather information. They were chasing Rezmir, and between the things they learned at Castle Neritar, the things they learned from Talus the White, and the things that they learned in Skyreach Castle from the Red Wizard's Room, they have a lot of crucial information about what the cult is up to that no one else knows. So I kind of remind them, like, hey, you have this information. You probably should tell people. Remember, the person that originally sent you on this mission to find out what the cult was up to way down south was Leosin. So you may want to return to Waterdeep to report to Leosin everything you found out. Like, I'm not going to tell them to do that, but I kind of explain as they're going through figuring out what their next move is, like, hey, your characters realize nobody else knows the things they know, and you have no other leads right now, so it might be a good time to return to tell Leosin what's happening. When they do that, when they return to Leosin, he's going to tell them, like, hey, great job, and realize, like, the things that they found out are a big deal, and they need to tell people. So Leosin is going to suggest, hey, let's call a council of everybody who will listen, and you can explain to people what's happening and why it's a big deal. So in that way, your party actually are the ones who call the council. Leosin, he's the one who pulls the strings. He knows people. He has influence. But the council isn't just everybody found out while you were away somehow, and they want to solve the problem, and for whatever reason, they want the party to do it. Instead, it's your party is onto something big that everyone else needs to know because it's going to affect everyone. And that way, your party are the ones driving the story forward. And it gives a narrative reason for why your party are the most crucial, most important people in the council, because that's how it's set up. Throughout the councils, you're trying to convince everybody to go along with the party's plan to stop the cult. And the way the book has it set up, it's like they know the cult is a problem, and everybody has these flimsy reasons for why they won't help. And it's like 10 different NPCs. I'll get into exactly how to go through and run the councils and to make it smooth when I do chapter 1. That'll be the next video I do. So I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it, but trying to run these councils with all these NPCs, all these different motivations, and all their reasons for everything they're up to, it is a lot for any DM, but especially a newer DM to handle. But I'm going to tell you guys how I do it. I'm going to break it down and make it a lot easier. So I'm not going to get into the details of that, but just know that's basically what the councils are. In this video, I'm going to tell you the surface level things that you need to know to understand the structure of how we're putting things together. They also have it so that things are happening all over the Sword Coast, where the cult is getting more active, dragons are attacking places, cultists are doing things. I don't like to have all that going full force at the beginning. I like, as the campaign progresses towards the end, those things get slowly worse and worse and worse until everybody is finally like, things are bad, bad. The book does change one thing from Horde of the Dragon Queen for the better. Instead of using experience, they just go ahead and full on say, we're using milestone leveling. They don't execute it well because the places that it says to level aren't great. It's very, sometimes you level fast, sometimes you level slow. There's not a really good progression. So I'm going to explain to you at what points I think you should have your party level also, so that they're level 16 by the time they fight Tiamat. I like to get my party all the way to level 20 because you're so close at the end of this campaign. And if you finish this campaign you're going to be the highest level. Your party's going to be the highest level that you may ever get a party in a D&D campaign. Most campaigns don't go as high as this campaign does. So it's hard for me to just give that all away and start a new campaign. I like pushing all the way to level 20. So everything after level 16 is homebrew stuff that I've created. But I think you'll really enjoy it if you want to take your party to level 20. I'm going to explain that at the end after we get through the story structure for this book. So the party calls the council. On the way there, they hear the Drahorn, which is this big, powerful, magical horn that the cult is using to call chromatic dragons from all over the Sword Coast. There's this moment where you're in the city and you hear its low rumble, kind of the way you hear the call of the Greybeards at the beginning of Skyrim. After your party explains everything they know about what the cult is up to, the people that are there at the council talk, discuss things. Instead of having 10 different NPCs, all with their own 10 different motivations, I basically break it down so that there are 3 groups. There are 3 factions within the counselors represented. And that way you basically can have one speaker for each of the 3 factions and only have to voice 3 NPCs instead of 10 or more. So there is a faction that thinks they need to marshal their forces, attack the cult head on where they're at, and just get rid of everything right away. There's a faction that believes that they should try to counter the cult in more subtle ways, try and get the dragon masks, try and find out what they can do about the Drahorn, and just try to, instead of risking thousands and thousands of lives in an all-out assault, use shadow games and guile to stop the cult, to thwart their progress. And then there's a third group that I have that they think that they shouldn't get involved. Like the dwarves, they think if they pull back into their halls, if they've got their underground fortress cities, that even if Tiamat were to take over, they will be fine. And that way, like I said, you can have 3 NPCs. One is kind of the mouthpiece for each of those factions, and it kind of simplifies things down a lot. They also have this chart where you score the feelings of each of the members in the council based on things the party did in the first book and how they handle things in this book. And there's this chart on how many plus and minuses you get, and that determines how much support they give you in the final battle. But they are always going to give you support. But if you don't get enough points, they don't give you full support. They just give you minimal support. But there's no explanation in the Battle with Tiamat chapter how their support or lack thereof has any effect on that battle. The only things that affect how strong Tiamat is are the things that the party actually does themselves there in that chapter. So if you really look at it as a whole, nothing the party does even affects the story in any meaningful way. It affects the story in like the experiences that your players have as they go through the adventure. But if they stop and look back at the end and are like, did anything we did during this book have an effect on anything? The answer is no, other than them going to fight Tiamat and the things they achieve in that chapter. That's the only chapter where what they do has any meaningful consequences. So I do use this chart as like a general guide because it kind of tells you how each of the council members feels about what the party is doing, but I don't strictly stick to how many pluses and minuses. I determine it both by role play, the decisions they make, and if one of these counselors isn't going to support the party, I don't let them send anybody to the Well of Dragons at the end. If there are no consequences, why are we even tracking it? Because there aren't. They can act like there are, they can say there are, but there are not any consequences. So I actually apply consequences to who they do and don't convince, and that makes the player's actions actually have some gravity, some weight to the story, because how much support they have will actually, the way I run it, determine their chances of success or failure at the end. Even if the party leans towards an all-out attack now, one, they have to try to convince people, and everybody's not going to agree. 2, there are things that they could work on now that they might as well do. Somebody has a lead on Varram the White, who has the white dragon mask. So if the party wanted to try to get one of the masks, they could go try to confront him. And there is an arcanist, an expert on the Drahorn, who went on a mission for the Arcane Brotherhood to the Sea of Moving Ice like 3 years ago. And if the party can go find her, 1, they will find out a bunch of things about the Drahorn, and 2, saving someone from the Arcane Brotherhood might bring favor from the Arcane Brotherhood and get a powerful ally for the council, whatever they end up deciding to do. So it's up to your party which thing they do first, but as a DM, voicing NPCs, you can kind of try to nudge your party one way or the other. I tried to nudge my party toward going to get the white dragon mask first because that seems like it would be like a devastating blow to the cult. If there's these 5 dragon masks and they seem like they need all 5, or each of the 5 at least is super powerful towards what they're doing, if they could get one of those 5 masks, that would be kind of a devastating blow. So I kind of try to nudge them with NPCs that direction for multiple reasons. I'm also going to work in a lot of those additional encounters because some of those are really cool and you can use them for good storytelling moments. Like on the way to Varram, I like to use the power of the cult encounter because it's basically like this area has been taken over by the cult and your party is faced with kind of a moral dilemma, which it's so much fun to give your parties moral dilemmas in D&D. They will stress so much over these imaginary people, but they can just keep pushing through and ignore this cult problem to get to Varram and hopefully get that white dragon mask, or they can do what some of the characters might see as the more morally correct choice and stop and help these townsfolk with their problem with the cult. So that's a fun storytelling moment, and it makes your players feel like they have agency, like they get to make the decisions about what they do and how they handle it, which is a good thing you should always try to preserve. When they go on the mission to find Varram, he actually lost his white dragon mask and is trying to use this ancient pool of divination to find out where it is. The book also never actually explains whether or not Varram succeeds in using the divination pool to find the white dragon mask, but the reason I like to do it first is I like to have him have succeeded in divining the location of the mask, but the party ends up capturing him. Then, whenever they question him about it, he can tell them, because he realizes he's defeated, that he saw Talus the White riding on Glazel the Cloud Chaser wearing the white dragon mask. So there you've got Talus, who you had your interactions with before. You most likely, hopefully, agreed to work with her, and then she betrayed the party. So the party already dislikes Talus. They know how ambitious she is, and they've had one battle with them already. They defeated her, but now that she has the white dragon mask, impress upon the party that she's going to be much tougher than she was the first time, which is sort of true, but you want your party to feel like it is. And I use that as a seed for the next part, which is he saw her up in the north, like around 10 towns around the Sea of Moving Ice. And then that way, since your party already had this lead where they wanted to go north to the Sea of Moving Ice to find out about the Drahorn, now they can be like, hey, 2 birds with 1 stone, we can try and find and deal with Talus the White while we're up there. And at the end of the Varram chapter, I have the party level up to level 9. Then you have the trip up to the Sea of Moving Ice. Now the book says basically just gloss over that trip, but that trip up the Sword Coast, there's a reason why this section of the Forgotten Realms is the most played. And there's a reason why the Sword Coast, specifically like the coast and those cities along the coast, are where most of your books and video games and everything, like your campaigns, all take place. It is the most developed, most detailed part of this world. To waste the chance to have your party go, one, sailing is awesome in D&D. Ship combats, water combat, it's all a lot of fun. 2, who doesn't want to feel like a pirate sometimes? Plus that journey north, you have the chance to explore Neverwinter and Luskan, which Luskan is a great role-play heavy city. It's run by pirates. It's really awesome. And all that trip north gives you a chance to work in things from your character's own personal story arcs. That's the other big piece of this that the book can't explain because they don't know what your party's stories are, but it's a crucial aspect of beefing this story up enough to justify leveling your party up so far. And any good DM wants to work their characters' side stories in, their personal character arcs. And you should have integrated some of that stuff throughout Horde of the Dragon Queen. Whether your character has a redemption arc or they're going on a journey like Keyless Aramente, those things should have their own side little missions that you go on. And NPCs from your character's backstories, just different things that weave in and kind of work together with the main story. If they have some connection to the main story, that is the best. But like Keyless Aramente didn't really have anything to do with the main story. Like they connected it a little bit, like enough to make it justified that they're doing it. But even if it's a little bit not in line with the main story, it's important to that character. So the rest of your party is going to be cool with handling those things. And so those things need to be like broken up in between. So this journey north along the Sword Coast is a great way to explore the world and a great way to get those character things in there. So when they get to the Sea of Moving Ice, I do the Arauthator chapter. It's a lot of fun between the journey north, the side missions you include there for your party members, and then this dungeon. At that point, I have your party level up to level 10. Once they kind of chase Arauthator away, if the party asks one of the villagers there, or if they don't ask, I kind of have one of the villagers kind of offhandedly mention another white dragon that's been flying around. They get a lead on Talus the White and Glazel. At this point, when they head into the 10 towns, you can use some of the stuff from Rime of the Frost Maiden. Obviously, you don't have the 2-year long winter that's happening, but that's got really good information on the 10 towns as a setting. So if you have that book, or if not, there's tons of stuff online you can look up. The 10 towns is a great area. Your party can kind of head over that way and look for Glazel and Talus. What I do is, the last couple times I've done this, is I include Frozen Castle, which is another small adventure that Kobold Press released later. I think you can get it for like $3 because the book talks about, like, it briefly mentions that you could have giants as allies, but it doesn't give you any missions to talk to the giants. I don't know if they like planned on fleshing that out more later and just ran out of time or money. I don't know, but having the giants would be a big deal. Finding out what's up with the castle and with Blagothkus is something the party is probably interested in. So what I do is, if the castle survived, then Glazel and Talus, once Blagothkus dropped the party members off, he headed north to talk to his buddies to figure out what was going on. Glazel and Talus attacked the castle while there was no one but Blagothkus there to defend it and crashed it. And then you go through the stuff in Frozen Castle where throughout that stuff you get to fight Glazel again. That adventure does not mention Talus, but I include Talus. And then you can forge that alliance with the giants. The castle is going to need repairs, but Blagothkus will promise that when the time comes, he'll add it to what the party needs for stopping the cult. And at that point, you can have the final confrontation, like the first little mini boss in Glazel and Talus. And the book has it so that, like, you don't get the white dragon mask from Varram because they never tell you what he found out, if he did or didn't, but he doesn't have it. You get a chance to get one of the other masks later, but once you get it, it turns out it is a forgery. And that contributes to the idea I was discussing earlier where I said that the party's actions don't matter. So when they defeat Talus and Glazel in the stuff from Frozen Castle, if you do that stuff, if you don't want to spring for the $3 or you don't want to do the Frozen Castle stuff, I would still homebrew a little mission for them to find and defeat Glazel and Talus at this point. I let my party have the white dragon mask. One, it's a super cool magic item that one of the party members can have. And two, it will feel like they actually did something that is going to have a negative effect on the cult instead of nothing they do mattering. Later, I do eventually have them find out that the ritual is going to go forward even if they don't have all 5 masks. But for now, they're going to feel pretty good about themselves, and not having all 5 masks does have a negative effect on the ritual, on the summoning of Tiamat, on how strong she is when she is summoned. So they do actually accomplish something. At the conclusion of Frozen Castle, I have the party go up to level 11. On their way back to Waterdeep, I launch the first cult attack from Chapter 5. And I also try to squeeze in some more character arc stuff if I can before they get back to the second council in Waterdeep. At the second council, the party is going to discuss with the council the things they've achieved, and then they get a lead on the green wormspeaker Naronvain, where he has been attacking people in the Misty Forest. They also find out that one of the attendees of the council is actually a metallic dragon in their humanoid form, and they get invited to a meeting of some powerful metallic dragons to try to convince them to join the cause. The meeting with the dragons, I tell them that there's a set date for it where they are going to meet, so they have a few weeks. That way they can go tackle Naronvain and not have to choose between the two things. If I got a pretty good bit of character story worked in before the second council to where there's been enough gameplay to justify it, when they finish the second council, I go ahead and let them level up to level 12. On their way to the Misty Forest, I go ahead and throw in that monstrous uprising encounter, because it's fun, it gives a little more meat. So for whatever the reason, the book has it so that Naronvain already left his green dragon mask at the Well of Dragons. But like I said, I like to have it so that my party has a chance to get those masks and actually affect the final battle. So go through the Naronvain stuff. That chapter's a lot of fun. And then if he's defeated, your party can potentially get that green dragon mask. They'll fight a green dragon along with Naronvain. That's a super fun chapter. Once they complete the Naronvain chapter, I go ahead and let them level to level 13. On their way back, I throw in the fallen hero encounter, and I use this as like the midpoint twist for the 3-act story structure. So far, the inciting incident kind of happened before this book even starts. So we're in like the first half of Act 2. We're going on ever increasing challenges. You're finding allies, you're growing in strength. And then I use this encounter as that midpoint twist. So what the fallen hero will explain to the party is that she has seen the forces arrayed at the Well of Dragons, and that nothing is going to be able to stop them except for an all-out attack with everything that the goodly peoples of the world have to offer. So the reason this is the twist is because up to this point, your party has probably been leaning towards thwarting the cult through their actions and have probably felt like they've been successful. And they have. They've had an impact on how that final battle is going to go. But based on the things this fallen hero says, no matter which faction of the council they were leaning towards, they have concrete eyewitness evidence that whatever negative impact they've been able to have, that has only increased their chances of success. It hasn't changed that the plan is going to end up needing to be everything that the good people of the world have to offer arrayed at once. This has to be total war from all of the allies they can muster. That is their only chance of success. Based on the evidence, the encouragement of this trustworthy fallen hero. So your party has to kind of change the way that they're looking at this thing from that point forward. At this point is where I squeeze in the second cultist attack. They have learned from their mistakes, and they are going to attack with both greater and more specialized forces, which I'll talk about it more when we get there. At one point, I think it's in the second cult attack, the book suggests that you TPK the party and have them get resurrected by the powerful members of the council and like keep going, and it could be an advantage because then the cult doesn't know they're alive. That's not a great idea. That is not a really good idea. Maybe have several of the party members get downed and a few survive. I mean, you're not going to decide who goes down, but they're basically saying like send such an overwhelming force that the party gets TPK'd. Don't do that. If a TPK happens because your party makes poor choices and your party has bad die rolls, that is something that you can deal with narratively how you see fit. If at that point you want to have the party get rescued and resurrected, which to me feels pretty lame, or you can have the party make new characters and be another group of adventurers that wants to finish the mission and save the day. But don't plan on a TPK. That there's a phrase that I've heard other people say called the old DM screw job. As a player, sometimes you just feel like the DM's kind of screwing you over through no fault of your own. You never want to make one of your party members or your whole party feel that way. So please don't ever, you shouldn't plan to kill one of your characters. Death should be a possibility, but you shouldn't decide like, hey, I'm killing this guy. And you shouldn't ever like plan to TPK your party because it feels like the game over screen. Like, I wouldn't be surprised or even angry if a party got TPK'd and they were just like, nah, let's just start a new campaign with new characters. Let's play something different. Like, we lost. That could happen. So just a side note, don't ever intentionally TPK your party. They know that they have a little bit of time left before the meeting with the dragons. They know from the fallen hero that even though the forces at the Well of the Dragons are vast, they obviously aren't ready for their ritual yet. All the chromatic dragons haven't arrived yet. The ritual hasn't been started. They need to be stopped, but until the party can convince everyone to go all at once, attacking with what forces have agreed so far is a losing cause. They have to make sure they have everything they can get before they launch that final attack. So I try and get some of the player character arc stuff in here, add more meat to the story, keep getting the players more invested so they care deeply about the future of this world. And then when the time comes, they head up to that meeting with the metallic dragons. Hopefully at that meeting, they can convince the dragons to help. It will be a huge benefit because the main enemy force is chromatic dragons. So if the good guys can get the metallic dragons to rally up and fight with them, that will be a huge benefit. The book, again, does not explain any mechanical difference in the final battle if you don't, but you're having to take a lot of responsibility on yourself to make this book work the way a good story should work and to give your players what they deserve. So realistically, narratively, having those metallic dragons is going to be a huge deal for that final battle. And it's going to make your party feel a lot better about the final battle. Whether it goes good or not, hopefully it does go well. Your party at that point, I have them level up to level 14. When they come back, they have the third council. Now at this point, your party has a really strong argument because of the things that they discussed with the fallen hero, that everybody, if anybody wants a chance to survive, and your party, this hopefully will be when they realize like this is the moment when they need to do their best role playing. Like the dragons was a big deal, but they need to convince everyone to agree to attack the Well of Dragons as soon as possible. And I let their role play in this moment have a chance to convince people that would not be convinced by that chart. If they role play their butts off, if they say compelling things, and if they role play really well, I don't even necessarily have them roll persuasion, because rolling is like seeing if your character can do something. Like you're not going to have the player try to climb a tree to see if they succeed at climbing a tree. But part of this game is role playing. And if your player can successfully role play the way that their character is talking and the speeches they make, the words they say, they can succeed. There's no reason for the character to have to roll to see if they succeed at persuasion. Your character literally did the thing. So if my party role plays really well, I let them possibly convince people that their actions didn't convince. So this is probably the biggest council as far as the party role playing and getting their allies to do what they need. The way that I have it so that you don't jump straight to the final battle is whoever agrees, they're going to say, okay, we're going to activate our forces. We're going to send our troops to the Well of Dragons. But it will take some time. Like it'll take a few weeks to march all our armies there. And because we have some powerful people around, when the time comes, because the party is such a powerful, such a useful group, such a useful tool, they might as well keep trying to undermine the cult while all the armies get in place. And then when it's time for the final battle, that's when we'll come back for the fourth council, and your party can just be teleported there by any of the powerful magic users or flown there by a metallic dragon. But so the third council is when you finally are like, hey, this is how I do it. This is not how the book has it set up. The third council is when you're like, all right, it's time to put up or shut up. Let's go. And they're like, okay, we're going to send the armies. You keep doing stuff as you can. And during this time is when I do Death at the Council, where there's a succubus that's attacking people. It's kind of the same situation as I did with the Power of the Cult, where there are big things happening, but there are people getting murdered. And so the party has to decide if they are going to postpone maybe some big things, because they're going to get the information about Xonthal's tower and maybe having a chance to get another one of those dragon masks. Are they going to be willing to put that off to potentially save some people's lives? Or are they going to decide that the impact that getting that mask has on the final battle is more important than saving a few people in the city's lives? So that's fun. I love forcing my party into those. There's no really right or wrong choice. There's just what they see as the most good or the most bad. So whether your party deals with the succubus or not, then it's time to head to Xonthal's tower. Xonthal's tower is a lot of fun. They have a chance to get a mask. This is the one where they get the blue dragon mask, but then they find out that it's a forgery. Again, I don't do that. I let it be the blue dragon mask if they succeed, if they get it. So they could potentially end up with 3 of the 5 masks. The book says in there that as long as they have 2 of the masks, they can make the Mask of the Dragon Queen and use it in the ritual. I know it's kind of lame. Like, it weakens it a little bit, the fact that they take the masks so seriously, but you don't even need all 5 of them. So if my party gets the chance to question somebody about that specific detail, basically I have, if they capture a cultist who's a high enough level to know this information, I pretty much have it explained that Tiamat's very smart, she's very tactical, and the reason why she sent out those worm speakers was like sacrificing a pawn, so to speak. She sent out targets that she knew would be too appealing, too attractive to ignore, and weak enough so that your party would go after them. So she basically used them as bait and a distraction to take up your party's time to keep them from getting and going straight to the Well of Dragons and finding out that stuff and acting against her immediately. That has only come out a couple of times, and my parties that found that out both felt kind of like they were tricked, but they also like had respect for the strategy that Tiamat used, and they were like, okay, yeah, Tiamat is the Queen of Evil Dragons. She's a tactical genius. Of course, she put out these valuable, squishy targets that we couldn't resist attacking, and we kind of played right into her hands. I haven't had any parties that I explained that to that like got upset about it, like, oh, we wasted our time, because like I said, even though she may have gave them the opportunity to do that, to lure them into those based on that explanation, they still do have a negative impact on Tiamat's power when she gets resurrected. So once they finish Xonthal's tower, then I have them level up to 15. During this time after that, while they are waiting on the armies to get in place and them to get the signal like it's time to go, then I try and work in some more of the player character arc stuff, because they have this sort of downtime where there are big things happening and they need to deal with them, but they can't do it yet because the armies aren't in place. So it kind of frees them up to have kind of side missions without feeling guilty about putting off the main quest, and it gets you more meat in the story. During this stuff, I run the Devilish Demands encounter, and I use that encounter with those devils as a way to hint to the party that they could potentially find allies among the Red Wizards of Thay, that not all the devils, not all the Red Wizards all agree with what's happening. And so even though it's not really supposed to be used that way, I got kind of tired of always just having somebody in the council learning this stuff and telling the party. I like to have other ways of them finding out this information. So the devils kind of hint to them like, hey, you might be able to make a deal with the wizards and Thay. Then after that is when I have them do the trip to Thay, because they still have some time before the armies are in place. And that gives me a chance to run the trip to Thay chapter, where they go and try and convince those red wizards to act against the other red wizards. On their way back from that is when I do the third and final cultist attack, where they're finally, like, they've had enough. They've really sent a lot of enemies to try and destroy your party. After the third cultist attack, I go ahead and have them level up to 16. It's about that time that they get called back to the fourth council, and they head off to the Well of Dragons to have that battle with Tiamat. The battle with Tiamat, the battle at the well section is really well done. I really enjoy it. The way that they have all your allied forces and all the enemy forces, and how the party gets to decide how those forces are arrayed, though the book doesn't explain. It does say that there are advantages to how you line things up, like obviously the metallic dragons are going to be a better enemy for the chromatic dragons, and how the assassins will probably be better at assassinating people than like rescuing hostages, but there's no mechanical advantage or disadvantage explained in the book. There's no way of mathing it out. So you're going to have to use your mighty DM powers and decide what you think is advantageous or disadvantageous, and where you think those forces will succeed or fail. I like to even have my party roll some checks for each group of allies fighting each group of enemies, just to get like an overall measure of how successful each group is. But then your party's doing the special forces thing. They're going to the Temple of Tiamat. They're trying to stop the ritual. And Tiamat is going to be like partially summoned based on the actions of the party. She's going to not be at her full strength, because if she was at her full strength, it would be very difficult for the party to defeat her. If you run this exactly like it is in the book, and you have this big epic battle, and this is the finale of your campaign, that is cool. That will be awesome. It will be epic. Your players will remember it. I like to use this for a different part of the 3-act story structure. I like to use it as the crisis. So one of the really satisfying parts of the 3-act story structure that is hard to do in D&D, and they don't do it a lot in campaigns, is where your party faces the final villain and loses. Not necessarily gets killed, but they get defeated, left for dead, whatever. And then your party has this really low moment where they're like, oh, we lost, what are we going to do? And this is in books and movies too. You can see this if you look at your favorite stories. And then they gather themselves. They decide that they're going to do what it takes. They find a power or a weapon or a secret that they didn't have before that is going to give them what they need to defeat the villain. They're going to gather their allies. They're going to bring back whoever they can. And they're going to go fight the final boss one more time and this time succeed. So because I like to get this campaign to level 20, that's what I use this for. If the party loses to Tiamat or gets to the point where they're probably going to lose, I have Tiamat rip her way all the way into the prime material. And then at that point, you pretty much can explain to your party by describing the devastation that Tiamat wreaks, that success is now impossible. They have no logical choice other than to flee. And so your party escapes as she's destroying her own people. She's destroying the good guys. She's eating everybody. She's ripping metallic dragons apart. Like, nobody is safe in this area because Tiamat is it's apocalypse level event. After that happens and they're fleeing, that's when I have them level up to 17 because they still finished this mission even though they failed. So your party flees, but they survive. And then I do some homebrew stuff. So all of this is past the scope of the book. I do some homebrew stuff where they are going to try and find any allies they can. The world is basically now like a post-apocalyptic setting. Chromatic dragons are everywhere. The forces of Tiamat have power. They're not going to eradicate every living person, but like every civilized area pretty much is under the totalitarian oppression of Tiamat's world government. And your party has to sneak around and survive in that situation. As they're going through this stuff, I tie up any other character arc stuff that I had not finished, which gets them to level 18. And what I do is I have Tiamat set up on like a big island off the coast of the Sword Coast, and that's like her seat of power. So I have a magic item I created. It's this crystal mace, kind of inspired by that crystal sword from the Wheel of Time. I have them, they're looking for information. They find information on this Mace of Eternity, and it's in 2 pieces. And the rod they have discovered at this like archaeological site. So the party can go there. They can do like some role play and convince the people to give them a rod. If they have to, they can take it by force. The rod, if they take it up to the peak of the Spine of the World Mountains, and they hold it aloft at dawn, the sun will shine through the crystal rod and will basically like be focused into a laser beam that will lead them to a dungeon, a homebrew dungeon I created called the Crystal Vault. When they discover the location of the Crystal Vault is when I level them up to 19. The Crystal Vault, I have it, it's a puzzle to get in. It's in the Honorrock Desert. It's like an inverted pyramid on the inside. And once they get in, there's one little beam of sunlight coming in, shining on like a tiny crystal sticking up out of the ground. There are doors, and once they go through the doors, they complete stuff. Each level, once they finish the puzzles in there, they lower the sand, revealing this gigantic crystal. And once they get to the bottom, the crystal is balanced on the head of the mace, and down there at the bottom is a Draco Lich protecting it. Once they defeat the Draco Lich, they get the head of the mace, they put it on the crystal rod, they have a weapon powerful enough to slay a god. Once they have that, I will have hinted at one of the metallic dragons from that meeting having survived, so the party can reunite with that ancient metallic dragon. There are going to be allies. There are going to be people who still want to resist. So your party is going to try and find people who they can have help them. I give them the opportunity to try and gather some of the other forces, like some dwarves and other people that survived that cataclysmic defeat against Tiamat. They gather those forces. They head out to her island. One final push. When they get to her island, that's when I have them level up to level 20. They fight their way up through the dungeon that I have that I've designed to use for her fortress. They have one final battle with a fully formed dragon goddess. They're all level 20. They have an ancient dragon on their side, and it is as epic as a D&D battle can be, because they get to be level 20. They've got some of the dragon masks. They've got this Mace of Eternity, and they are fighting a fully formed god, and it is epic. Level 20 is crazy. It is tough to run that high. You don't want your party to be at level 20 for very long, but the chance to get a party to level 20 and to fight a god is just too good of an opportunity that this book gets you so close to, and I feel like it's a missed opportunity not to just push the rest of the way. So that's why I do that. That's why I put this structure in place to get the party to the point where they are getting to be a group of level 20 adventurers fighting an evil goddess with all kinds of awesome equipment and amazing powers. And on the times when I've run this all the way to level 20, that the party succeeds and defeats Tiamat, I have it so that, and the seeds are in there because the Red Wizards have been mentioned several times. They've been involved in this from the beginning. When the party defeats Tiamat, I have it so that Szass Tam actually set up this ritual to sacrifice a goddess so that he could ascend to godhood. Not that Tiamat was being brought back. It was all a dupe. It was, Szass Tam's a brilliant lich. He's incredibly smart. If they don't defeat Tiamat, I let her be the big villain for the final part. But if they defeat Tiamat, or if you just want to do it this way, I have this whole thing have been the master plan of Szass Tam. And he uses the sacrifice of Tiamat essentially to ascend himself to godhood. And then you still have the Apocalypse stuff and the Gathering Allies, and I still use the Mace of Eternity as a weapon that can slay a god, but I have Szass Tam in his stronghold in Thay as the final god boss villain that the party goes and fights. And I still level everything up the same way. And it has still been epic, and the party has still been very satisfied with that ending. Anytime that a party gets to level 20 and gets to fight and defeat an evil god, they're going to have a good time. But that's pretty much how I do it. That's how I structure the story. That's how I take the scattered jumble of good content that this book has and turn it into a really satisfying story. If you've made it this far, throw me a like. If you want to keep up with this campaign, any of the other campaigns I've done walkthroughs of, or any of the other videos I like to do, feel free to subscribe. If you feel like it, cram that hype button. It's a new thing they created to help smaller channels like me to compete against the big corporate sponsored giant channels. If you want to support my channel, you like what I do, you like how I do it, and you want to help me keep making these videos, I do have a shop on my channel. There's some fun, silly D&D apparel on there. I do have memberships live on my channel. Shout out to GL, Sammy J, Jose, Cody, Silent Wraith, Dan, The King in Yellow, Taylor, Keith, Daniel, and Arwicki. These videos do take a lot of time, effort, and money to produce, and your guys' contribution helps out a lot, so thank you. Here are some other videos I've done that you guys might like. Thanks, guys, and God bless you.